Hello and welcome if you're new to my channel, and if you are a subscriber, a warm welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Wagyu, and Wagyu is a breed of cattle that originates from Japan, and it literally means Japanese cow. I'm going to be talking about Wagyu in the context of it being a luxury food item, as opposed to my being an aspiring food critic or chef. I'm Anesu Sagonda, and I produce educational luxury content for people after the finer things in life. So whether you're somebody who's young and starting out and wanting to reap the benefits of buying quality from the get-go, or you're somebody who likes luxury but you want to focus more on the brands that are under the radar but heavily weighted on quality, or you're new to money and wanting to learn how to navigate the terrain, then my content is geared towards you. Like a lot of people, I really struggled during the pandemic. I would have incredibly high moments and then spectacular lows. And as a way of just getting through the pandemic, I started being a lot kinder, a lot more generous, just being good to myself and doing more of the things that I'd put off over the years because of the cost. And one of them was just indulging more in luxury food items. Top of my list was Wagyu. I'm not somebody who eats a lot of red meat. I can literally count on one hand the number of times I will eat red meat in a year. I enjoy it, but from a health point of view, I just cut it out, and I was quite disciplined about it. But I'd always wanted to try Wagyu, but the cost always put me off. I always felt like I could use my money to do something else with it. I could better utilize it elsewhere. And I just thought, you know what? One of the things that has become so apparent with the pandemic is life is so fleeting. You can literally be here today and gone by the evening. And I thought, you know what? Go for it. I'm not eating that much red meat. I'm going to be eating it every 3, possibly 4 months. But each time I eat it, why don't I elevate my experience and go for Wagyu? There are 3 different types of Wagyu available in the United Kingdom. There is the UK Wagyu, which is essentially the sperm from a UK breed of cattle fused with the egg from a Wagyu cow. And then the second one up is the Wagyu itself, which is imported from Japan, but you also get Wagyu from other countries, Australia, there's Chile, there's Spain, that have done the same thing as what happens with the UK Wagyu. And then there's the top end, which is the Wagyu Kobe, and that is Wagyu from Japan, but specifically from Kobe, and that is the Wagyu at the very top end of the market. And there are 2 butcheries that I typically source my Wagyu from. There is Turner and George for my UK Wagyu, and they are located in Angel, North London. I'm going to include address details in the description box down below. And then the other butchery where I source my Wagyu and Wagyu Kobe is Provenance, and Provenance has about 3 or 4 branches in London, but it's only the Chelsea branch that stocks the Wagyu and Wagyu Kobe. And I use those 2 butcheries because of the quality of their meat. They source very high quality meat, and also the service. For me, the winner is the service. You cannot beat the service you get from these 2 places. It's very different. Turner and George is a one-off branch, and it's a lot of guys who are just fun. You go in, you spend 10, 15, 20 minutes just chatting. They talk you through the different cuts, what else they have in stock, and they never force themselves. You just end up buying more than you intended to because they're just good at selling their stuff and recommending what's good depending on your taste and your budget. And then Provenance, it's young guys, they're fun, they're jovial, they know a lot of things, and I've learned a lot about Wagyu from them. And they've also introduced me to, for example, your Chilean Wagyu, which is a fraction of the price of the Japanese, but it's also incredibly flavorful. And then you have the bavette. You have various cuts of your Wagyu. You have your bavette, you have your ribeye, you have sirloin, you have fillet. 9 times out of 10, a butcher will recommend ribeye. It's fantastic in terms of the taste. But another one worth getting on your radar is a cut that is very underrated. It's bavette. It's still soft and fantastic in terms of flavor. It's just underrated, but it's worth the worth buying and actually trying. So it's those two places that I go to. You're spending a lot of money on Wagyu, and I just want a place where I'm assured in terms of the quality of the meat. Mistakes are going to be expensive. But talking about prices, you have your UK Wagyu. Depending on the butchery, you're going to pay between 50 to 70 pounds. For your Wagyu, you're going to spend anything from about 100 to 150 pounds, depending on the cut and also the butchery. And the top end of the market, your Wagyu Kobe, that is anything from 300 through to 600 pounds a kilo, depending on the butchery. But at the top end of that market, the market, your 600 or 300, whichever you're paying, it's the A5 grade of Wagyu Kobe, and that's the very best in terms of it's intensely marbled. With Wagyu Kobe, you're buying into the marbling, so the fattier it is, the more delicious that piece of meat is going to be, because all the flavor is in the marbling, which is the intramuscular fat. Trust me, you look at it, I looked at it for years and I was always put off and thought, oh, it looks horrible, and all I could imagine was eating glugs of fat. But you don't actually taste the fat when you eat it. You just taste a very rich and buttery texture to the meat. Wagyu itself has a very, very low melting point. It's even lower than the human temperature. So it melts in your mouth. It's also very soft in terms of the texture. And then superior health benefits. Of all the different types of beef, it's the healthiest. It has the highest level of your monounsaturated fats, also, which is your good fats, and you could eat it literally all day, every day. What would put you off is just the rich taste and, of course, the cost of it. But it's also very high in your omega-6 and your omega-3. It's literally a super beef. The taste is unparalleled when you compare to all the other types of beef available in the market. It's head and shoulders of any other type of beef. It's very soft in terms of the texture. It melts in your mouth, and it's incredibly healthy. That is what you're essentially buying into. It is above all the other cuts, all the other types of beef. But the Wagyu itself comes from 4 different types or varieties of cows, or rather genotypes of cows. There's the Japanese black, Japanese brown, there's the Japanese polled, and Japanese shorthorn. All 4 are very different in terms of the type of meat that they offer. 90% of Wagyu beef in the market is from your Japanese black, and that's because of the marbling, which is where the taste comes from, and also the very soft texture of the meat. The Japanese brown, for example, it's known for its very low fat content and also its mild taste. So depending on what you like, you can look accordingly. But 90%, as I mentioned, of Wagyu beef in the market is going to be your Japanese black. But one thing I can say, having tried all 3 types and from different countries as well, it's a game changer. Like I mentioned in my video with the wine tasting, which I'm going to attach above, if you are fanatical, if you like red meat, and I know a lot of people talk about the health issues of eating too much red meat, but if you are conscious about eating too much and want to eat less, but you want to elevate your experience, or you just want to try the best in terms of beef, in terms of the taste, in terms of the texture, and also the health benefits, Wagyu it has to be tried. It has to be tried for the experience, for the taste. But one thing I can say, if you source very good quality Wagyu, it's important which butchery you use. It's delicious. You will struggle to not keep going back again and again. I think what you'll struggle with is just the budget and the cost, which can be a bit prohibitive, but it is a phenomenal tasting piece of beef. A couple of months ago, Kenya literally went crazy. There was a Wagyu tasting event. An Australian chef, Chris Wade, hosted 2 events, one in Mombasa and one in Nairobi. In Mombasa at the Sarova White Sands, and in Nairobi at the Five Senses restaurant. And on the back of that article, the country went into overdrive talking about this 20,000 shilling steak. And I worked with Business Daily Africa, an East African business newspaper, and wrote an article about how to prepare a 20,000 shilling steak. I'm going to include the link to that article down below, because if you're going to spend that amount of money on a piece of steak, you need to be sure of how to prepare it very well. And I wrote this article, and on the back of the article, I thought to myself, why don't I create a video of actually me preparing Wagyu steak using the instructions that I wrote for the Kenyan market. For this video, I purchased 2 UK Wagyu steaks from Turner and George. My favorite butcher served me, and he recommended for a steak of that type and quality to go for 2 centimeters thickness. I bought 2 steaks, and they were just a little over a kilogram in weight, and I paid just over £50, which is half of what I would have paid in a restaurant for each steak. I had them in the fridge from about late Wednesday afternoon through to late Friday afternoon, and I took them out 2 hours before they're due to be prepared. Because of the thickness of the steaks, I wanted to give them enough time to come up to room temperature. Typically, the recommendation is from about 30 minutes and above before they're due to be prepared to be brought out of the fridge, for them to come up to room temperature and for the meat just to relax. But with how thick they were, I just didn't want to make any mistakes, and 2 hours was fine. It wasn't too long a time for them to be out of the fridge. Once they were ready to be prepared, I cut off a corner of the fat. In my instructions, I recommended a pea-sized amount, but the amount of fat you cut off or use to lubricate the pan very much depends on the size of the steak. These were sizable steaks, and I was cooking them one at a time, so I cut off a generous corner and then placed it in the pan for a good 2.5-3 minutes. It melted a little bit, and then I manually just ran it over the entire pan just to make sure the entire pan had been lubricated. And then I waited for about another minute, a minute and a half, until the fat had started to smoke. And then I placed the steak. The temperature was medium high. It needs to be high enough and cooked for long enough so the steak sufficiently and evenly cooks. The secret is making sure that you heat the fat high enough to cook it. It starts to sizzle, but it doesn't burn. Wagyu steak is very much about the fat. All the flavor is in the fat. If you don't cook it sufficiently or high enough for it to melt and cook, then you don't bring out the true flavor. You lose a lot of the taste if you don't sufficiently cook the fat. But you need to be careful not to overcook it or have a temperature that's too high, in which case you potentially can burn the fat and you alter the taste. Because of the thickness, I went for 6 minutes on each side. The first 6 minutes, then I flipped it over. I didn't touch the steak at all in between all of that cooking. After the second 6 minutes, so a total of 12 minutes, I took it out because I knew it was ready and I knew it had evenly cooked through. But you can use a meat thermometer to check the temperature of the steak and whether it is medium rare. Temperature for a steak that's medium rare, that sort of thickness, is about 54 through to 60 degrees Celsius. But I have a table in my instructions with the time or the temperature you need for the different levels of cooking. But with Wagyu, it needs to be either medium rare and above. It can't be medium rare or mi-saignant and below, because it just wouldn't melt the fat enough and the meat would not be as delicious. Once it had been cooked, the full 12 minutes, I placed it on a board for about 3 to 4 minutes. You can cover it with tinfoil. I do, and sometimes I don't. It just depends on what's going on. But I don't really notice a massive difference, except it just cools down a little quicker. But it was 3 minutes and then sliced and served very quickly, and was still delicious. Once it was sliced and placed on the plates, that's when I typically add my salt. I don't like a lot of salt, and I can actually go without salt sometimes, but with the Wagyu you need just a little bit of salt just to help tease out more of that flavor. But I tend to add that when the meat is resting. That's when I add the salt, and then sometimes I'll add just a little bit more when it's being served. It was served with two options for illustrative purposes. The summer option, which is with either a house salad or in this case rocket, and I made a homemade dressing, very easy, extra virgin olive oil, some mustard, vinegar, salt and pepper, and just drizzled it over the rocket just to add a bit of tanginess. Or the other option, which is typically my winter option, but you can also have it in the summer, it's still nice and light. Broccoli, parboiled broccoli for a couple of minutes, and then placed it in a hot char grill pan, and then no oil, just salt and pepper and the chilies. That way the broccoli can get burnt on the groves, and you have the brown bits on the broccoli. And then I also had tomatoes, and I sometimes roast tomatoes or grill them, or in this case fry them. Roast tomatoes are typically soft, and I didn't want soft tomatoes, but I wanted fried tomatoes because they're typically crispy on the top, and then the inside is lightly cooked, and it's not as mushy as you get, for example, with your roast tomatoes. But the steaks were absolutely delicious. It's one of the best discoveries, one of the best things I have done during the pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're somebody who likes red meat, in particular your steaks, if Wagyu is not already on your radar, you need to get it on there. Work your way up from the bottom and go up, and you just notice how the flavor gets better and better. Either on your bucket list or something you do every so often as a bit of a treat. We all deserve it. During the pandemic, we need to be good to ourselves and do nice things that just make life a little more fun, a little more bearable. But do let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the Wagyu, and whether you'd like me to also feature possibly Wagyu or the Wagyu Kobe as well, and do something similar. As always, thank you for watching, and do subscribe.